As you start to fire and wire those thoughts, you start installing neurological hardware. If you keep repeating it, repetition creates software. It becomes automatic because you installed it. People really want to begin to change. The first thing I think is so important is to gain as much information as you possibly can about understanding your body, understanding how your brain works, understanding how your heart works, and in a very, very practical way, understand really just the intelligence of what's possible genetically, even with this vehicle that we've been endowed with. And so the more we understand what we're doing, the more we understand the why are we doing it, then the how all of a sudden starts to get easier, because we can begin to assign meaning to what we're doing, and we can put more intention or more effort behind it. So the first step is the unlearning process. I mean, your personality creates your personal reality. That's it. And your personality is made up of how you think, how you act, and how you feel. So the present personality who's listening to this broadcast has created a present personal reality called their life. So that means if you want to change your life, you're going to have to change yourself. If you want to change your personal reality, we have to begin to look at our personality. So this doesn't mean you just start thinking positively and hope for the best. No, because if we're thinking the majority of the thoughts that we think every day is the same thoughts as the day before, well, the same thoughts lead to the same choices. The same choices will lead to the same behaviors. The same behaviors will create the same experiences. The same experiences produce the same feelings and emotions. And those same redundant feelings drive our same thoughts. Now, here's the problem. Our biology, our neurocircuitry, our neurochemistry, our hormones, and even our gene expression is equal to how we think, how we act, and how we feel. So if you keep nerve cells that fire together, that wire together, you keep thinking the same way, doing the same things, experiencing the same emotions, over time, the body begins to memorize through neurocircuitry. We hardwire our brain, and the feeling that we feel every single day just becomes a subconscious feeling. Like, most people don't even know they feel guilty because that's how they normally feel. So that makes up 95% of our identity, our personality, by the time we're 35 years old. So it becomes a very subconscious state of mind and body through habituations, through emotional conditioning, through hardwired patterns, and so in emotional responses. So then the first step to change is becoming conscious of those unconscious states of mind and body. Now, most people don't like to do this because, as Greg said, they'd rather get distracted by technology. They'd rather turn on the TV. They'd rather call someone up and complain. This is lighting a match in a dark place. This is all of a sudden, the word meditation means to become familiar with. So when you're sitting in a meditation and you're hearing words like, I can't, it's too hard, I'm never going to change, I want you to know that in that moment, you're not doing your meditation wrong. I want you to know that you're actually doing it right, because now you're becoming conscious of those unconscious thoughts that have been happening behind the scenes of your awareness. And if you're sitting there and all of a sudden you want to get up and quit, and you want to get up and move because your body's been in a program, and all of a sudden you become aware of that, or you notice how you speak and you decide not to quit, I want you to know that that's a victory, that you're executing a will that's greater than the program. And most people lose their free will to a set of memorized programs. If you're sitting there and your body is just looking for the rush of energy so you can get angry and agitated and frustrated, and instead of just thinking you don't have any control of that, you could settle your body back down into the present moment. You are telling your body in that moment that it's no longer the mind, that you are the mind, and that's a victory as well. And most people quit when they come up against the boundary of the known self. So now, stepping out of the known into the unknown is the perfect place to create from. So it makes sense then, if you truly wanted to change, and I studied this when we studied spontaneous remissions. Well, the first question is, what thoughts do you want to fire and wire in your brain? I mean, I think that's an important question. So when you put intention and attention behind it and you understand what you're doing, as you start to fire and wire those thoughts, if you keep doing it, you start installing neurological hardware. If you keep repeating it, repetition creates software. And all of a sudden, that will be the new thought in your head that says, I can, it's possible, anything's possible. That becomes the common thought in your head. There's no magic there. It becomes automatic because you installed it. And if you said, who am I going to be today? Well, how am I going to live? And instead of getting up and just starting a routine, while you sat there with your eyes closed, you rehearsed mentally the choices you were going to make and the things you're going to do. The research shows that if you do that properly, the brain won't know the difference between a real life event and what you're imagining. And if you stay present with it, you install neurological hardware. If you keep it up every day, it becomes a software program and you start to behave like a happy person. Then here's the challenging part. Can you teach your body emotionally how it can feel in a new future? That means that you're going to have to feel the emotion of an event before it happens. So most people will wait for their healing to feel gratitude. They'll wait for the change in their health to feel wholeness. That's kind of the old model of reality of cause and effect. We're waiting in lack and separation for something out there to tell us that we'll be better in here. That's a very compromised way of living because we live in separation our entire life and we're disappointed. But if you understand that the body is so objective that it doesn't know the difference between an actual experience that was creating the emotion and the emotion that you're creating by thought alone, and it's the environment signals the gene, you're signaling the gene ahead of the environment, and genes make proteins. So then by elevating your emotional state, you are telling your body now to move back into growth and repair. And the word meditation literally means to become familiar with, and that's what you're doing. You're becoming so familiar, so conscious of your old self that you will not go unconscious again. And then you are moving into a new state by firing and wiring and elevating your emotions. If you keep practicing that, it'll begin to become familiar to you. But many people that we've studied that actually heal, I want you to know that when they truly make those changes, they'll tell you that was their greatest teacher. They will tell you it was their greatest lesson. They're so happy that they had the experience because they literally changed who they were from living in a familiar past and into a new future. And it takes practice. Practice is what matters the most. We live in a Newtonian world. We live in three-dimensional reality, and most things take time. And so if you're working at it every day, shaving down those habits and overcoming those emotional states and emotional reactions, and you're becoming conscious, that is when you're no longer the program. You're conscious now. You're unconscious when you're the program. So that process sometimes takes people time to do that. And for me, in my own life, it sometimes we have to make our way. Why? Because we return back to our lives and we face challenges and we're back taking on the world again. But sometimes and we have scientists now coming in to study this, we see an instantaneous change that takes place in the body. I mean, it is immediate. There it is, and there it's not. Whether it's blindness, deafness, tumors, stage 4 cancer, we've seen it all. So then the fact that it's happening in no time tells us it's not an effect of matter to matter. This is energy influencing matter, and it's not matter that's emitting a field. That's the illusion. It's the field that's creating matter. So learn how to change information in the field. Then the hologram in three-dimensional reality begins to change, and it takes practice. And so when you see energy influencing matter like that, because it's happening in no time, it's a quantum phenomenon. That means that's information that's coming in. But the information that's carried on a frequency that your nervous system, once practiced, can begin to transduce that frequency into meaningful information. And the autonomic nervous system in our studies show that it is so outside of normal in terms of energy. I mean, thousands and thousands, I mean, just way outside of normal in terms of the amount of energy in the autonomic nervous system. That autonomic nervous system is getting a very coherent message to all the other systems in the body, and the person gets a biological upgrade in a matter of seconds. Now, we've actually been able to study that process, and it is immediate. And when you see it happening in that immediate, you would consider that a miracle, but the person is transforming in that moment. And they never return back to the same person. That's when energy is really making the biggest difference in matter. And you don't have to be a Buddhist monk or a yogi to do this. We know that it's a technique like anything else. That if people do this properly, there's more energy that goes to the brain, and there's an ambient field that's created around the body. The body's actually heart is actually releasing information in the form of frequency. That frequency is energy that's carrying information. And when energy makes it to the heart, this is the place where there's the center of polarity or duality. This is the union of opposites. This is where our wholeness begins. And when we do this properly, if you have that community of people, like 1,000 people in a room, and they're creating that kind of heart coherence, if they can lay the thought, the intent on that frequency for the greatest good, say people in the front of the room wearing a heart rate monitor, it's very surprising to see the majority of those people who are receiving that energy, that their heart goes into coherence at the exact same time, the exact same day, and the exact same meditation. So there's non-local effects that are happening to a person's autonomic nervous system, that they are being entangled or entrained to some frequency. So I thought, well, God, goodness me, if that's the truth, you could do it with a person sitting, within 10 feet of you, or you can do it to someone on the opposite side of the planet, because only connection. In fact, it is an invisible field of energy that connects everything and unifies everything materially. And people are fooled by their senses into separation. And so I thought, well, what if we create this kind of fun game where you send someone a video message, an audio message, a text message, or you call them up on the phone, and you take a moment and you tell them what you love about them. Now that is going to drop the veneer, the facade, this kind of protection that we have. And we saw our community do this with such sincerity. And the moment you start doing that, you can't not feel love because you're expressing it. And it puts the person who's receiving it in an altered state as well. And they're more prone to receive love because they're starting to feel the same energy, the same emotion. So then the person goes into a meditation, then it's called Go Love 20. And then at the 15-minute meditation, on the understanding that they can entrain someone else. And when we love somebody, we want them to feel what we feel. So the way we typically do that is we give. But that's one way, matter to matter. So we're putting them into our heart and seeing once we do this, what the effects are. And then they take it and then they turn to someone and they do the same thing. And we've had over 50,000 people now doing this little thing. And it's a way to create a network of love that in fact is a different consciousness than the consciousness of fear, of pain, of suffering, of importance, control. We tend to be more selfless when energy makes it into our heart. Now, that is a new consciousness. Imagine that people were so familiar with the feeling of love, they could regulate to such a degree. And we've seen oxytocin levels in some of our studies go so high off the chart. And oxytocin signals a chemical called nitric oxide, which signals another chemical called endothelial-derived relaxing factor that causes the arteries in your heart and lungs to literally swell. So now, with the same kind of reaction that we have in our sexual organs when we're aroused, that same intensity happens in the heart. Now, when that occurs, there's a reset in a person's baseline for trauma. Their immune system, their thymus is getting a lot of energy, their heart is regulating properly. That's a new consciousness. That's a consciousness that cares for one another, that tells the truth to one another, that supports one another, that informs one another, that heals one another, that shines for others so that they can shine, that considers the others when they make a choice. That is a new consciousness. And imagine that feeling being constant for you instead of fear. Imagine that feeling. And the research on oxytocin says that when you feel just a little bit of love, or you have a little bit of an elevation in oxytocin levels when it's externally administered, that it's impossible to hold a grudge. In other words, this isn't something where you're trying to be spiritually advanced and saying, I forgive you. This is, I feel so good. Listen, I feel so great. Forget about it. I don't care. I'm free. You free yourself and you free someone else. So there is a new consciousness emerging. The collective consciousness, if that we can do this, creates a network that is transcendent of space and time. That is a new consciousness. And that's what we need in order for us to begin to make this world a better place. So it makes sense the old has to fall apart.